Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst it is necessary to approve these orders this afternoon, this debate does provide the opportunity to highlight the very serious challenges that the most vulnerable in society are currently facing as a result of inflation rising to levels that we've not seen for decades. Back in September, there was a recognition that the CPI would probably rise above 3.1%, but not to 5.4% in 3 months, and not to the 7%, which is currently predicted may be reached in the next few months. At that time in September, there was probably a consensus view that the significant rise in earnings of the order of 8% was an anomaly resulting from the reopening of the economy as COVID restrictions were relaxed. Set in that context, one could understand why it was financially prudent to suspend the triple lock for 1 year. 5 months on, this would appear not to be an anomaly, not to be a one-off. Whilst I recognise the support measures in place to support the poorest pensioners, which my honourable friend the Minister has outlined, the Government must be prepared to provide more targeted assistance. Back in September, I supported the retention of the £20 uplift in universal credit. I feared that COVID would have a long and vicious tail, and I was concerned that its withdrawal would hit a lot of people very hard. Subsequent events have shown that the uplift should have been retained. Universal credit has the advantages that its infrastructure is up and running and is in place, and that it is targeted at the poorest and helps people to stay afloat and not to spiral into destitution. Set in the context that prior to the pandemic, the annual uprating for universal credit had been frozen for 4 years, this increase is helpful, but it neither makes up for the lost ground in the past, nor provides adequate support for the most vulnerable in the immediate future. Again, I recognise the other support measures that the Government have introduced: the increase in the UC taper, the increase in the work allowance and the household support fund. However, at the current time, the cost of living crisis is the most serious challenge that the UK faces, and the Government must do more in terms of targeted assistance to protect those for whom the most immediate outlook is bleak. And in this context, I do welcome the Minister's assurance that the Government are keeping the situation under very close review. Last week's announcements were welcome, but I sense that they were too broad and too shallow, and more deep and carefully directed support will be required. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
SNP spokesperson.